the screen. Okay, I see nodding. Okay, cool. So I'm Sam. As Chris mentioned, I'm half of Alternative Travelers. That's my travel blog. And then House Sitting Travel is my new podcast all about house sitting. And today's topic is how to get free accommodation with house sitting. You'll see there's little asterisks there in the free. So we're definitely going to be talking about that because while no money gets exchanged sides, you need money involved. So don't worry, I'm going to talk about it, but that's just kind of how this type of house sitting is talked about. But it's really, really good to be aware of that. So we'll get into it. But yeah, so a little bit more about me. There's going to be lots of photos of me with animals and just animals in general in this talk. Because as I'll get into, house sitting is pretty much equal to pet sitting. There's usually pets involved. I've been house sitting since 2016, all over the US, all over Europe, and had plans to continue that when the pandemic kind of shook things up, to say the least. But the good thing about house sitting is that it is a good kind of socially distanced way to travel as people start to travel again. I know we have people from all over the world, so everyone's circumstances are going to look a bit different. But yeah, so that's a bit about me. I also have a book, the House Sitting Handbook. Been writing about house sitting since I started in 2016. So as I'll share at the end, I have like so many resources for you guys. So don't feel overwhelmed as I'm going over everything, because even though house sitting is like, it doesn't have to be hard or overwhelming or anything. There's a lot that can go into it. But, and so today I'm just going to give an overview of the process, answer like frequently asked questions that I get, go over common misconceptions, all that kind of stuff. And then I have a ton more resources for you guys to like dive even deeper into it if you think that this is something that you want to do. So yeah, so this photo's from Salt Lake City. That's like the first place I did a house sit for people I didn't know, and that was back in 2016. So what is house sitting though? Let's start there. So like I said, house sitting is pretty much equal to pet sitting for the most part. I've been house sitting, yeah, over 5 years now, since 2016, and I've done one house sit without a pet. And so that's kind of like a prerequisite of being a house sitter, I always say, is that you kind of have to also love animals and love caring for them and be familiar. Of course, you can get familiar if you want and you like animals, but you're not, you're not super confident maybe in your skills. There's definitely ways to get better at that, but you kind of do have to like animals if you want to do pet sitting. So there's two types of house and pet sitting, and I'm kind of going to use those terms interchangeably throughout. So there's two types, paid and exchange based. So paid pet sitting is when you pay, the pet owner pays someone, the pet sitter, to take care of their pets. And this is usually like someone has a local business and they have like repeat clients, like a dog walker kind of thing. And people might go away for a couple of days and they pay for someone to take care of their pets. So that's not the kind of house sitting that we're talking about today, because we want to talk about house sitting in order to travel. So that's kind of the free or exchange based. I like to say exchange based because it highlights that it is an exchange. So the house sitter takes care of the pet owner's house in exchange for accommodation, and the pet owner gets pet care in exchange for providing their accommodation. So it's all about that exchange and making sure there's a win-win for both sides. So there's no money that either side changes hands. And that there can be different things that come into play. Like if you're somewhere for 6 months, some places might ask you to contribute to utilities. Some house sitters do that, others don't. That's kind of like getting more into, I don't know, advanced house sitting stuff. But just so you know, that in my opinion, I think it's best when money just stays out of the whole scenario and it's just focusing on the win-win, because both people are getting a great thing. I mean, think about how much you pay for accommodation when you're traveling. That's a huge expense, probably the biggest expense. And then if you have a pet or, pet owners, they're getting free pet care, which is also a huge expense. I mean, huge. And so it's just a real win-win. I can't like emphasize that enough. That's really the most important part. So yeah. So I wanted to go into some common misconceptions because I think that's a really good way to illustrate more about what this kind of house sitting is. Because usually when I say that I house sit or I'm explaining house sitting, people have these really common misconceptions. They come up again and again and again. So I think it'll help illustrate what house sitting is, to kind of talk about what it isn't in a way. So a lot of people think, you know, oh, I want to start house sitting. I want to get a house sit in New York for June 10th through 15th. Like, how do I get a house sit at that time? So someone thinking about that is really thinking about it in terms of like, it's like booking a hotel or an Airbnb where you decide where you go and then you book the trip and you book your accommodation and it's all good. So house sitting is not like that. It's the pet owners are the ones that decide. They're the ones taking the trip. They're the ones that initiate. They're the ones that set the dates. So as pet sitters, you apply, and I'll get into in a bit where to find these house sits. You apply and the dates aren't set by you. So it's not like you can just go on a website and like, you know, booking.com or Airbnb or whatever and put in your place, put in your dates, and you get a house sit for those times. You got to be flexible. That's pretty much one of the really important things about being a house sitter is you really have to be flexible. You will find that you're pigeonholing yourself into things if you're just looking for a specific place at a specific time. And yeah, so that's kind of like one of the most common ones I hear. House sitting is also not a free vacation. So that's another really, really common one that I hear because of the word free, which is why I put that asterisk there. I kind of don't like calling it free accommodation, but it's kind of the easiest way to explain what's going on. It's exchange-based house sitting is kind of more of a mouthful and people don't get it as much. So, but it's just because you're not paying for something doesn't mean that it's a free vacation, because you need to pay for something in other ways. Like nothing is truly free here in life, I guess. And house sitting is another example of that. So I kind of think of it as like, it's kind of like couch surfing mixed with Airbnb in a way, because you have the sharing economy concept that comes with couch surfing, where I don't know if anyone here has couch surfed, but you connect with a host and then you stay in their place for free and you kind of have a mutual exchange. And so house sitting is like that in a way, because again, neither side pays each other. But then you get your own place. So that's really great. So, because I like couch surfing, but a lot of times I like to be myself at the end of the day or something. Like I think house sitting is really great for introverts actually, because you can travel with friends though. And that's actually one of the next ones that I have on here. That only, certain types of people, only couples or only single people or only retirees or only digital nomads, only remote workers, whatever the case, only those types of people can house sit. That's not true. Anyone can house sit, provided that you love animals and can care for them, and you are prepared for anything to happen. You're flexible, like I mentioned, that's super important. There's a lot of characteristics that can align to make house sitting fit for you, but just because you're either not a digital nomad or not retired or not whatever, you can house it full time. You could house it for a vacation to save on accommodation or just try out a new way to travel. You can house it in the next town over. You can house it in your own city to try out a different neighborhood. I I'm from New York City, and when I go back there to visit my friends and family, I'm always house sitting in a different neighborhood. So that's super cool. Although I will say that another common question I get asked is, how do I house sit in New York, Paris, all the like most famous places in the world? And I will say that you got to kind of work up to that. It's like in anything, you got to kind of work up to those more competitive places. Just to let you know, because I know as soon as people hear, oh, I can get free accommodation, of course they're going to want to go to the most expensive places where you can save hundreds of dollars per night on accommodation. And I totally get that. I mean, I've house sat in expensive places all over the world that I wouldn't have been able to stay in otherwise, like London, New York. I mean, different places, US Virgin Islands. But that happened kind of after, and I already cut my teeth and got my experience elsewhere in less popular places. Like I mentioned, the first place I house that was Salt Lake City. It was an amazing experience, but so many of my friends from New York were like, where are you going? So important to house sitting. So yeah, so these are kind of like some of the common misconceptions. Mentioned free. That's a really big one. And so either people think it's a free vacation, or they think the opposite. Like if it's free, it's somehow a scam. Like, oh, that sounds like a scam. I'm not trusting this. Like, what? People just let you stay in your house for free, and I think people who are already familiar with maybe alternative ways of traveling, like couch surfing or home sharing or anything else, this won't feel like so much of a scam. But it's still something that I really get asked a lot because people see free and they think if you're getting a free pet sitter, it's somehow good, or if you're getting a free place to stay, it's somehow not good. And that's not the case on either end, and it shouldn't be the case. So yeah. Oh, and the last one that I want to mention is that you sign up for a house sitting website, which I'm going to talk about in the next slide, because that's how you find house sits. But a common misconception here is that these websites, you just sign up and then you sit back and then the houses just start like rolling in. And that's also not the case. So you need to do some work and effort to get, like I said, nothing really comes for free. So you do have to put forth some effort. And when you're there, of course, you have to take the responsibility very seriously of taking care of someone's pets and their precious home. So that's huge. So those are just some common misconceptions I get, because I think it helps illustrate what it's not. Because I think everyone comes into house sitting with some misconceptions. I probably did back in the day. So hopefully that clears up some things. It's definitely not like this SpongeBob GIF that I put in there. You don't have to do anything. That's not true. Okay, so where do you find house sits? House sitting websites. So it's a picture of me, my partner Baron. He co-hosts the house sitting travel podcast with me. So Trusted House Sitters is one of these house sitting websites. It's the biggest one. So these house sitting websites are basically meeting places for the pet owners to connect with the pet sitters. So I kind of like to say they're like dating sites in a way, because they're just like a place for you to connect. They don't guarantee a match. It's not like you sign up for, I don't know, match.com and they're like, look at all these wonderful people that just align with you exactly. And here they are just waiting for you. Like, that's not how it works with dating sites. It's not how it works with house sitting. It's kind of just, a place for everyone to connect. So they're like dating sites also, in that both sides will have profiles and you can message each other, and then you arrange a mutually beneficial house sitting arrangement that way. So I said before, they don't guarantee a match. They're just a place to connect. I really recommend this as the way to start house sitting. I have done since I've house sat since 2016, few of those years were full time, and I've done like one house sit not through a website, not through one of these house sitting websites, and that only happened because they came through my blog. So like that's not a good way to rely on it either. And so it's really the best way to find house sits. There's Trusted House Sitters, like I mentioned, that's the biggest one worldwide. It's the only one that I've ever used, the only one I've ever needed to use because it is worldwide. And when I was looking at what website to join back in the day, I was like, well, I want to join something that I can use wherever I want to go, because we were traveling full time and we are like, we want the whole world to be open to us. But there's also country specific websites. So if you're only house sitting, I mean, as many of us are only traveling domestically, you could start with a country specific website. Like there's House Sitters Australia, House Sitters UK, USA. Those are kind of like the big ones. But yeah, so these websites work on a membership basis. So like you pay a one-time annual membership, and then you can house sit as much as you want, or you can get as many pet sitters as you want. I don't know if there's any pet owners that are here, but and you could get a joint membership where you house it, and then when you go away, you can get someone to take care of your pets. So it's kind of that's really cool also. So then you can be, you know, sure that someone's taking care of your pets. I know so many people have adopted animals in the pandemic. So that's why I really feel strongly that house sitting is only going to grow as like a great way to travel for both sides, because more people now have pets and are like, wait a second, I want to travel. Like, what do I do with my animal? Paying for pet care is really expensive. And also it's more disruptive for the animal as opposed to keeping them in their own house, their own environment. I feel really passionate about that because I love animals so much. And I love that they get to stay in their house and they love it. I mean, they honestly, like some house sitters say, it's like the pets get to go on a vacation, because usually the house sitters often are home like more often than their owners are, because a lot of house sitters do either they're going on a, you know, to explore a new place for a week or something, or maybe they're working online. I work online for myself, so like I am around those pets all day and they love it. They absolutely love it. So yeah, that's kind of a brief where to find house sits. So I know everyone is thinking, or maybe thinking, because I get this question, is, oh, you have to pay for house sitting website and they're not guaranteeing a match. That sounds like a scam. That's again where the whole scam idea comes in, because it is true. You are paying for something and they're not guaranteeing a match, but I can absolutely tell you that if you go about things the right way, you will find a house sit eventually. And these memberships aren't crazy expensive. Even the most expensive one is like $100 a year. And think about how much you'd pay for accommodation. Like that's maybe one night somewhere. I mean, if you're staying in a hostel, a few nights, but still, again, you're getting your whole own place. So I just feel like for me, it's like, that's a no brainer. Like, even if you're house sitting a couple times a year, that cost is so minimal. And it also just provides that barrier to entry. So people who aren't serious about it on both sides aren't going to pay for something. So it, it just makes both parties be more serious about it. Like there's some websites where the pet owner doesn't have to pay to do their listing. And I've checked out those websites and a lot of them are just filled with like abandoned listings because people don't have to pay. So they just kind of throw something up and they're like, oh, if this works out, it'll be great. But like, if it doesn't, like, I have someone else in the wings, like my nephew can do it or something like that. So the people, in my experience, I'm sure you can still find good house sits on there, but like in my experience, there's a lot of abandoned listings on there. And like, I don't want to waste my time going through that. I'm sure you don't either. So I just feel like it's a super minimal cost. And again, house sitting isn't free, totally free. Like even though you're getting free accommodation, you still need to pay for your food, your enjoyment of the place, getting there. You need some money. This isn't like, $0 in your back pocket kind of way to travel, because it's, as opposed to something like work exchange or work away where you get your room and board provided. And so you have your food covered, you have your place to stay covered. You could, not spend anything, but that's kind of not the case with house sitting, because you do need to pay for your food. But again, like you are getting a whole own place to stay. And a lot of places I tend to house sit in really urban environments because I like that. And a lot of them are just some chill cats, like you feed them, you hang out with them, or like some little dogs and you walk them. Again, it's usually less work than a work exchange kind of thing where you might have to work, I don't know, 4 to 5 hours a day. I mean, how long does it take to feed a cat and hang out with them and do something you already would enjoy? I mean, for me, petting animals, I mean, hanging out with them, like that's not work to me. And for anyone who's thinking about house sitting, it shouldn't really feel like work either, because again, it's kind of all about the animals and we wouldn't be there without them. So yeah, anyway, that I'm actually an ambassador for Trusted House Sitters. So I do have discount codes for anyone that wants them. I will send all those out at the end. All right, so to go over it, because I know I'm throwing a lot of info at you, but so this, I just wanted to show you kind of the basic overview of the process. And again, like each one of these steps, like this is grossly simplified. Each one of these steps has different things in it, probably having more questions now that you're seeing this. And so I'm gonna try to make sure we'll definitely have time at the end for questions. So, but yeah, so your number one thing you want to do is you want to join a house sitting website. You don't want to wait until, you don't want to be browsing the websites day after day and wait till you see something that you like, because then you're going to have to join, you're going to have to set up your profile, you're going to have to apply. That could be gone. Like that house, it could already be gone by the time you get all that in order. So you want to just, once you realize that you want to try this way of travel, then you want to sign up and start looking for house sits and just start familiarizing yourself with the website, working on your profile, checking things out, looking at listings to see what you like. People post new house sit listings every day all over. I think it's really fun to look through these different listings. It's a virtual travel in a way almost. But yeah, this is another question I get asked a lot. Like, oh, I just saw this house that I really like. What do you think the chances are that I'm going to get it if I sign up now? And I'm like, I'm never going to say never, because anything can happen. But you're putting yourself at a disadvantage if you're waiting until that house sit comes up for you to see. And also, some websites, I know the one I use, Trusted House Sitters, non-members only see listings 24 hours after they've been posted to members. So you're already seeing listings that are a day old, and a lot of listings won't even make it to that day oldness because people want to arrange things, especially people are traveling a lot more last minute now because constant restrictions and stuff like that. So if someone, I got invited the other day to a house that started the next day. I couldn't do it because it was so last minute, but that's just to say that if you're not a member, you're going to be missing out on a lot of potential listings. And one of my top tips is to kind of apply to house sits as soon as absolutely possible, because then people who are really on it on the other side are going to be looking at stuff coming in. And if they see you, they're going to be like, oh, this person looks great. Let me arrange a call with them. So yeah, so number one is join a website. Then you want to set up your profile. So a lot goes into that. And that's a whole nother thing. I have lots of resources on that for you guys, because I could talk about that for a long time. But you just want to put stuff in there like your experience with animals, why you're house sitting, all that kind of stuff. Again, it's kind of, in a way, it's like your resume a little bit. And then when you're applying to house sits, that's kind of like your cover letter, like when you're sending it into people, because you don't want to send your whole list, like this is all my experience, but you want to tailor your application to their, what they say in their listing. I can't tell you how many times, because I pick the brains of every pet and homeowner that we house sit for. I just think it's really interesting and to learn their side of things, because it is all about that mutually beneficial exchange. And we often ask, why did you pick us? Or whatever. And a lot of times people say, I can't tell you how many people I had apply that were just like, this house that would really work for me because I really have always wanted to come to Paris, and so please pick me. And I'm just like, what are you offering them? You need to kind of of course you want to go to their place by applying, but make it about the other person, and understand that they're opening their home to you. So you kind of want to, I don't want to say sell yourself, but like you do kind of want to in a way. And this isn't to say at all that your own needs shouldn't be met, because that's something I also feel very strongly about, which I'm going to get to in a bit. But your first point of contact should make that person be excited about talking to you more. It's not agreeing to the house sit, it's just saying, I'm interested, let's have a conversation. Because I also really strongly suggest and feel that everyone should have a conversation before committing to a house sit. So that's like step number 4 is arranging the house sit. In my opinion, I always suggest people having like a face-to-face video call, because it really helps dissuade any fears that both sides will have. You know, you can, I mean, even though it's virtual, and in person is always the best. I mean, sometimes you can meet people in person if you're house sitting locally, which is a great way to start, because when you meet someone in person, that trust in you automatically just goes up. They like see you, like you're a real person, you have a conversation. So meeting in person is great. It's obviously not always possible. And we've only done that a couple times with places where we were already sitting. For example, like that Salt Lake City house that we first did, we lined up another one in Salt Lake City right after. And even though we weren't that experienced at the time, we met the person in person, and she was like, you know, you're not as experienced as the other people that have applied, but they are coming from Australia and you're here. So let's do this. And so that's how that happened. And that is a really key thing to keep in mind, to kind of start building up your experience, because with these house sitting websites, you'll get reviews. So the more reviews you have, obviously the better that people have vouched for you, and the better that you'll be able to get like future house sits, that like domino effect kind of thing. So again, there's a lot that goes into all these steps and kind of just like breezing through them. So but in this arranging house sits kind of phase, you want to ideally have some kind of face-to-face conversation, just so you can like read each other, get a feel for each other, because it's all about if it's a good fit for both sides. And you want to, as the house sitter or the pet owner, if there's any pet owners listening, you want to make sure that you're feeling super confident in the person and that you're feeling good about it. You get all your questions asked to make sure if there's anything that you're unsure about, you know, you talk about responsibilities like briefly and all this kind of stuff. It's not a long conversation. These conversations are maybe 20 minutes usually. And I think if someone, in my opinion, if someone doesn't want to have a conversation with you as the house sitter or vice versa, a 20-minute conversation, like, and they're going to invite you to their house and home, like that's kind of a red flag to me, because it shouldn't be a big deal. Everyone knows how to use Zoom now. Like if you don't, I don't know where you've been the past year. So, or I mean, not even just Zoom, there's so many ways to video chat, WhatsApp, Google Duo. I mean, the list goes on and on, Skype, whatever. In my opinion, some other people feel differently, but in my opinion, I've always arranged my house sits through video calls, and everyone's always been like, yeah, great, let's definitely do that. Or they've suggested it. So it's really not a big deal. And it's really important to make sure that you're getting all your questions answered, because you don't want to go into something feeling not like some reservations or anything, because that's what might lead to a negative experience, which is another big topic that so many people ask me about. They're like, have you had any horror story like experiences? Like, I'm really scared, I'm not sure. And I'm going to get into that in a second, because I haven't, but I know that's a fear. So, and then, yeah, the next one is house sit to travel, like enjoy yourself. Like that's why you're doing this. You want to explore new places, you want to meet new people and new pets and save money. So all of those great things, because the other great thing about traveling this way is the people that you meet. I mean, I've done repeat house sits. I mean, that one I mentioned in Salt Lake City, like I went back 4 years later, actually, it was the last house sit I did before the pandemic. And so you get these connections with people over all over the world. We've house sat for people in Berlin that then moved to Amsterdam and all this kind of stuff. Like it's really cool way to connect with people also. And it's a really, really great community that's really passionate about this way to travel that's kind of unorthodox, but it's definitely growing, I think. So that's pretty cool. Okay, so the dreaded bad house sit. Got to talk about it because, again, this is a question that I always get. Do you have any bad experiences? And if people see this GIF, that's what they're thinking. They're like, this is just awful. Like you just walk into a place and it's just garbage everywhere or terrible people. Like, I don't know what people are envisioning, but it's because sometimes house sitting in the media, usually actually house sitting in the media gets talked about as either like really glamorizing it, like, oh my gosh, feed a cat and then you lie by the pool and the jacuzzi for like weeks on end in like the Caribbean. And they're like, it's not talking about the real responsibilities. Or then on the other end, they're like, oh, these house sitters, they ripped off these pet owners, or oh my gosh, these house sitters arrived at a place and it was a garbage pile. Like, I don't know. There's just, it's really unfortunate that there's such a disparity of how house sitting is portrayed in like traditional media. That's why I feel really strongly about kind of quashing all those misconceptions on both sides. So yeah, I've never had a really terrible experience. I've definitely had experiences where I'm like, that was fine. I wouldn't go back, but it wasn't off. It wasn't like that bad house sit, everything. You know what I mean? Like we all have preferences and you're going to learn things as you go. Like you're going to learn what you like and what you don't like. And that's fine. That doesn't mean something's a bad house sit. So it's also like super subjective what's a bad house sit and what's not, because some people, like for example, I don't really do farm sits. There's a lot of animals involved. It's a lot of work. And even though I am two people, my partner and I usually travel together, we also are working and we just know our limitations, I guess, and what we want in a house sit. Whereas like I interviewed someone recently who she travels with her family of 5. And so she's like, I put them all to work and it's great. We're on a farm and it's great. The kids get to learn about the animals and all this different kind of stuff. So that's just to say it's super subjective and what's good for one person might not be good for another. So it's about getting really clear about what you want and also listening to your gut and not ignoring red flags. So I learned this early on in our house sitting journey. It was like the 3rd house sit that we were arranging, and we met her in person. We went over to her house, this woman who we'd be talking to, and there had been kind of some weird things in the communication, but we were new and we were like, let's just try this out. And we met her and like just getting like weird vibes like the whole time, like you can't sit on all of these chairs, like all of these rooms are going to be locked, like all of these different, like including where the Wi-Fi was, even though I was like, I work online, so I'm gonna, what if something happens with the Wi-Fi, like that's important. I can't be in a locked room. I don't know, just all of these different things that it was like, it was no one thing that was like truly bad, but it was just like put me on edge immediately. And I was like, I'm not gonna be able to like enjoy myself in this house, like if I can't touch anything and I'm gonna be here for 5 weeks. So we were really unsure though, because we didn't know. And so I connected with the house sitting community and basically everyone was like, don't do it. If you're ignoring red flags, like you just could be walking into a bad situation. Not saying it would be bad, but like you could, you wouldn't enjoy it. You'd be walking on pins and needles or all this kind of stuff. So you can, as the house sitter, as the pet owner, you can say no to a situation, even after you've had a conversation. You can be like, hey, thanks so much. Like, I just don't think it's the right fit. I've done that before and it's no harm, no foul. If you don't want to agree to something and then just be sitting there with that dread and then back out last minute. That's not cool. And that's not good for the whole house sitting community because it gives all of us a bad name. So don't do that. Just that's why open communication is so key about getting your questions answered, making sure you see photos of the place to see the level of cleanliness or mess or whatever, ideally. And if you're cool with some clutter, that's fine too. Like everyone's preferences are different. So You just want to have that conversation. You want to see photos of the place. And if there's anything that comes up that, makes you pause and you're like, not sure about that, you can ask a clarifying question. Or if there's a bunch of things and you're like, just not feeling this, then just say no harm, no foul. So that's why it's really important to also have like backup plans and all of that kind of stuff. You don't want to be house sitting out of desperation or anything. I know a lot of nomads, myself included, have been really impacted who are house sitting full time by the pandemic. But that's why it's really important to be able to shift gears, have that, if you're doing it full time, be able to pay for places in between or whatever. So you don't have to agree to something just because you're like, shit, I need a place to stay. But that's why it's also like right now I'm not house sitting full time because of the pandemic, and I'm doing it part time, like just to explore different parts of New York State where I am. And so that's also cool. So yeah, the bad house sits also something I could talk about forever, but I'll just go on from here. So some more cute photos. That little kitten, oh, she was so cute in Glasgow. Marshmallow was her name. House sitting is really big in the UK. FYI, it's definitely popular in certain areas around the world as opposed to others. Just as a quick note, it's really popular in the UK. That's super popular there. And Australia, it's pretty popular. US, it's pretty popular and growing. Those kind of places. It's not as popular in like South America or parts of Asia. I think because of like cultural norms about like having other people you don't know in your house. Like I lived in Spain for a few years and I like house sat occasionally, and it was always ended up being for expats because in Spain, like it's you have a lot of your social life is outside of the house, like not inside the house. So even like close friends, like I had friends that I didn't never ended up going to their house because we always just meet in a bar or cafe. So like the idea of having someone you don't know in your house is very weird in a lot of cultures. I mean, it's weird in the US also. So like, especially in other places, it's even more weird. But so yeah, so you just want to think about whether, based on everything I've been talking about today, is house sitting for you? It's not for everyone. That's totally cool. I've definitely met people on both sides that think the idea is cool, but they're still like not fully on board with it, with that whole, like at some point you have to make that leap of trust and trust another human coming into your house and taking care of your pets, or going into someone else's house and taking care of their pets. Like, yeah, you're showing up to someone's place that you've never met before, and it could go badly, I guess, is what people always worry about. But in my experience, it never has, because I've always had that conversation. And you kind of fine tune your read on people if you don't already feel like you have a good one. It's a learning process, and it'll definitely be still learning as you do this. So it could be a good fit for you if, again, you love animals, you're flexible, you understand the responsibility that's involved. Like you can't just, if you show up to a place and everything's fine with the house sit, but you just don't end up liking the area, it doesn't mean you can just leave. Like you committed. So, and I've heard of people doing that, and it really makes me angry because it's a bad luck for house sitters overall. Like you committed, so you stick it out. No matter if you like the place or not. Like, I mean, if it's the house is a terrible situation or whatever, that might be a different case. I'm talking, when I'm saying the area, I'm talking about like, say you don't like the city or don't like the countryside, or you don't like whatever, like that's too bad. Like you agreed to it, and that's why you got to do your due diligence beforehand. You can't just leave. So you understand the responsibility, and you're looking for a unique way to travel. So house sitting could be for you if any of those things apply, because it is a really unique and really awesome way to travel. Obviously, I'm super passionate about it, but it's just really, really cool. But it might not be for you. And again, it's totally fine if it's not. It might not be for you if you want that spontaneity to be able to just go somewhere for a couple of days and somewhere else and then change your plans on a whim. You want to be able to book a place for a specific destination. You don't like animals. Again, you're going to be really putting yourself at a disadvantage if you don't like animals, because there's very few that don't have animals. Or you find it difficult to trust someone else. Like if you're thinking, oh my gosh, I can't go into a stranger's house. Like, first of all, I would say they shouldn't be a stranger by the time that you arrive, because you should have had conversation at least. I don't feel like I'm showing up at a stranger's house. I feel like I'm showing up at a friend that I haven't met yet, like their house. So, but if that's a real barrier for you, that's fine. Like you don't have, you don't have to house it. And hopefully this talk has kind of illuminated things for you to see whether it's something you might entertain, like going into further. So hopefully I did good with time so we can have some questions. Oh no, I talked so long. Okay, this is all the resources. I'm gonna send a link. I'll send an email follow up with everyone. I know Nomadic Network will send one out. I have so many resources. I've got a book, the House Sitting Handbook. You can use the code TNN for a discount for that. That's really like everything is in there. There's a workbook to help you like with like some prompts and templates of how to fill out your profile and your application and all that kind of stuff. The templates people find really, really useful. Again, you should always personalize things, but it's good to have something to look at. And the book just goes through literally everything, like everything. And so then we also have the House Sitting Travel podcast that I just started with my partner, and I interview other house sitters because I feel really strongly about showing that anyone can house sit. So I mentioned I interviewed a woman who house sits with her family. I've interviewed couples that are retired. I've interviewed solo men and women and just a broad range of people. So that's very cool. And then I also have intermixed with the interviews episodes that are like more advice based. And so going into all of this kind of stuff. So yeah, that's everything. I've got discount codes. Always feel free to email me, hello@alternativetravelers.com. Connect with me on Instagram. I have 2 Instagrams. One of them is just all about house sitting, is House Sitting Travel. That's for the podcast. And then Alternative Travelers is, I mentioned house sitting on there, but I talk more about like sustainable, responsible travel and all that kind of stuff. So connect with me on there. And yeah, let me know. I'm always happy to help with any questions. So I think we can do questions now. I can stop sharing my screen.
Yeah, we've got a bunch here. And just as a reminder for everyone, we'll be sending out all of that information on Friday or Saturday, probably the slides too, so you can get all that stuff if you didn't happen to take a screenshot or if you're not busy taking notes. But we've got plenty of time for questions, so I'm just going to jump in here. When it comes to insurance, Leah's asking, is there help/insurance if your house sit is canceled last minute? Like, what do you do? Is there support? That happens a lot with Airbnb, as I'm sure people know.
Yeah. So I'm glad you asked about that, because I had it mentioned on one of the slides, but I didn't talk about it. So thank you for asking that. Yeah. So the website I use, Trusted House Sitters, again, it's kind of like the biggest one. It's the only one I've ever used. So I'm not trying to like, I don't know, just promote them for no reason. Like I actually use them exclusively to house it full time. And they have an insurance thing. And now they're kind of testing out different tiers of what insurance is. And they do have insurance for both the pet owners and house sitters now. So yeah, if something gets canceled, then you can get help with your flights or rebooking accommodation or stuff like that. And then on the pet owner side, they have insurance for like, say something's accidentally broken in the house. I mean, it happens, we're all human. Like I've broken glasses and stuff. I mean, most people, everyone I've house sit for has been like, whatever, don't care. But again, that's because I vet people like really carefully. I really care about the connection. I don't care as much about it being a fancy place. I care about a chill person that's gonna like, we're gonna work together and be flexible and it's gonna be great. So yeah, I mean, for example, on this point about insurance, basically everyone that was house sitting when the pandemic happened was canceled on because obviously travel stopped. So my next house sit was canceled, and the people were like, oh, so sorry, we have to cancel, like our plans got canceled. Obviously it was totally out of everyone's control, but they were still they were amazing. And they were like, we'll, pay you to reschedule your flights. And I didn't take them up on that because, all the airlines had to be able to, I still have that credit somewhere, but still it was a testament to like that we, had arranged a good house sit and those people had our backs basically. So yes, that's a long-winded way of saying that the house sitting websites, do, at least the trusted house sitters when I use, they have insurance now. But also it kind of goes into like trying to make sure it's a good fit and arrangement, because then they'll also have your back. And sometimes people will be like, you can still come stay. I've heard that happening to people, all that kind of stuff.
Cool. A couple people are asking about the pets themselves. Like, have you ever had or talked to anybody who had a pet sort of react poorly? If the animals and people didn't necessarily get along, or if there were problems there?
Yeah, I mean, I've never had that experience. Generally, people I've found, based on talking to people that I know that have really reactive animals or dogs or whatever, they tend to not get house sitters, or they'll get like they'll hire and pay for a local house sitter so that that dog knows that they have the same person again and again and again. It's better for them. I had one cat that was like a little nasty, but I mean, a cat, like they avoid you, you avoid them. It's no big deal. Like, yeah. And so it for sure can happen, and I'm sure it has, but that is another reason why you want to ask questions about that. Is something I always ask, like, how does the dog, or I mean, mostly I guess people are probably asking about dogs because, like I said, cats, they just do their thing and they don't want anything to do with you if they're not liking you. But a dog, you have to take them out for a walk, so you want to ask questions about how do they do around other dogs. If you should be aware for that, can they go to the dog park, how do they do with other people, all of those kind of things. And, you can kind of read people. That's why doing a video call is good, because people, could be use euphemisms and for things, but you can kind of read between the lines, I find, if there's something up with their dog. We house it once for a puppy who was really sweet, but not being trained very consistently. Actually, people at the dog park ended up commenting to the pet owners afterwards, like, wow, your dog's gotten so better, like, since the pet sitters are here. Cause like my partner was like kind of quasi training the dog to be better, but there's only so much you could do in 3 weeks. The dog was very smart, but not being consistently trained. And, pet whisperer, I saw someone say, yeah. But yeah, you just want to try to, that was again an early house sit for us. So that was when we learned to kind of, it wasn't terrible at all. It was just like, okay, we need to ask a little more questions about the situation.
Mm-hmm. How far in advance do you recommend people sort of consider when they're planning?
A great question. It really depends, honestly. It depends on you, the house sitter. It depends on how far you want to book out. I mean, for us, when we were doing it full time, we would tend to book, like when the pandemic happened, we were booked like 6-7 months out, but that's because we were doing it full time. So we wanted to ensure that we had a place like to stay. But then again, like, you can also do things that are last minute. Like I said, someone asked me the other day for one that starting the next day. I couldn't do it because I wasn't there. But if you're in the city, that's a great way to get experience, is with those last minute house sits, and you can explore different areas if you're in a city, or different regions of your state or province or wherever you are around the world. It can be a cool way to do that more local travel. How far do I book out? Yeah, so it really depends. Like, I just talked to someone actually rescheduling that house that got canceled on us. We just talked to them about rescheduling for March next year. And that's usually way further in advance than I like to do, because as we've all learned in the past year, anything can happen. So we kind of were like, we'd love to do it, like, but tentatively, and let's check back in, in a few months kind of thing. So I think when stuff is that far out, that's kind of the case, not like hard dates, especially now. Everyone kind of understands, which is a good thing. So I guess the short answer is it really depends on how far in advance you want to book.
Cool. And is there more a demand for house sitters, or vice versa? Like, is there on, in your experience, is there sort of more of is there sort of an ample amount of pet sits, or is it, is everybody fighting tooth and nail for them?
It's a good question. It's a very timely question, because it's definitely changed in the past year, because Now there's definitely a lot more house sitters looking than there are pet owners looking to travel because, and again, this is going to really vary depending on where you are in the world. I'm in the US, so vaccinations are rolling out, thankfully, but that's not the case, of course, everywhere around the world. So it is going to depend. Wait, bring me back to the question. Let's getting off track.
Yeah, just whether there's
where there's more house sitters than pet owners. Yeah, so right now there definitely are more house sitters than pet owners, because I think people are still being very cautious with traveling. So there's just not as many pet owners traveling, or maybe they're taking their dogs with them, or if they have dogs, for example, because they're doing more like road trips or outdoor exploring or other stuff. You can't fly across the world, anymore, really. So people aren't taking those extended trips yet. So yeah, right now that is the case, but still, that's why I really suggest trying in local, like near you and lesser known places, because you'll still see that most people aren't really applying to those, and then you can get your foot in the door that way. But yeah, I would just be aware of that going into things like right now. Like I wouldn't really recommend trying to just dive into like full-time house sitting right now, because you're going to find it kind of hard to line the things up back to back. But again, like you don't have to house sit full-time. Like I think a lot of people think that that's the case, but you don't. Like you can do it as just a way to subsidize your travel.
Cool. Well, one quick one. If there's a couple traveling, would you recommend they make a couple sort of profile on the site, or cool?
Couple, yeah, that's what we do. We normally travel together, my partner and I, and it might be the case in the future where I do some solo ones or something or whatever. I still use like our profile, and I'll just message someone like, hey, by the way, it would just be me this time, and if they're not cool with that, that's fine too. Like, you want to make sure it's a good fit. So yeah, you just need one if you're just going to be traveling together. And the same is the case for if you're maybe traveling with a friend. You could, I know some people. I actually interviewed a woman who she started house sitting with a friend, and then she eventually ended up going on to house sitting by herself, and just doing, you can just adapt your profile depending on the circumstances.
Cool. Another one here. How sort of tied to staying in a house or apartment are you? Like how much sort of pet sitting versus going out to explore, like what's that ratio like?
Great question, and it depends. I know I keep saying that, but it like every situation is so different, which is why, again, having that conversation. I mean, people will put in their listing, like there's different sections, and one of them is for like the responsibilities. So they'll say what the responsibilities are, and you can kind of get a feel for how much time you're required to be in the house. But yeah, that's why it should really be an equal exchange. You shouldn't have to be tied to the house at all, like never leave. Like that would be pointless in my opinion. So you just want to see what the routine is, like if the dog needs to be walked, like when is that. Also ask like how long can the dog be alone. I mean, cats, they're generally fine longer periods of time, but for the most part, yeah, you got to stay overnight, and you should be not out from like 6 a.m. to 6 p.m. every single day. I mean, of course, you can have longer travel days and stuff, and it depending on what they say with the pet's routine, that's no issue. But yeah, it just depends. So you got to ask, but it's really it's in my experience, all the house sits that I've done have been very reasonable, just normal. I mean, most people have cats and dogs, so that's really what we're talking about here. So of course they can vary, but within normal parameters.
Speaking of animals, what has been the most, have you had any sort of more exotic animals you've taken care of? And also, what have been the sort of the longest and shortest house sits that you have done?
Yeah, we took care of parrots once. I think I had a picture earlier of the parrots. My partner grew up with a parrot, so like he had parrot experience, which is why we ended up getting that house sit. But they had had house sitters previously that didn't have parrot experience, and they were like, it's fine, we just teach you. And it was funny because the parrots ended up, they were more bonded to women, so like they would sit on my shoulder, and they would like flap their wings at him, so it was really funny. He would like clean their cage, and they'd be like flapping their wings at him. So yeah, so parrots, that's been the most exotic. Mostly it's been cats and dogs. One time like a amphibian, like frog, fish, but yeah, mostly it's cats and dogs. And then the longest and longest, we tend to do longer house sits because like I said, we were traveling full time. So we like to travel slowly and really get the feeling of a place, and it's really disruptive to be moving all the time. So I think the longest that we did was just over 3 months. And the one that I've just arranged in March next year is going to be over 3 months actually. So that will be very cool. And it really lets you get into routine of a place. But obviously I know not everyone has that kind of lifestyle or ability to do that. So then there's house sits as little as a weekend or a long weekend, and I've done those also. So and that's nice because you can just have a little getaway for a weekend, and that's cool too. So again, it depends, but that's the range
Is
I've done.
there, do you find that there's sort of like a generally sort of a more common, like most house sits are, you
I
know,
think, yeah, I mean, there are a lot of shorter ones. I would probably say from like 5 to 7 days to maybe 2 weeks. That's pretty common because, think about most people's vacation time. That's, I mean, in the US, unfortunately, what we have to deal with. And then it depends also where you're house sitting, because like places like, Spain, France. I mean, I guess most of Europe where you have more vacation time, then people will take longer vacations, and then there'll be a lot more house sits during those periods of time. So that's also something to keep in mind.
cool. Do we have any more questions before we wrap up? Um, if not, no worries. We'll be sending out Sam's email, so you can always email her if you do sort of think of questions later. Sort of any final sort of last minute tips for first timers?
Yeah, I mean, kind of like, just to repeat, I feel like what I've been saying, it's like, it's great. It's a great way to travel. Just be flexible. Communication is really key, as I keep saying, because there's really a range of people, their homes, locations, pets, put all those together, and every house is completely different. So you want to really have a conversation, connect with the person. You should agree to a house sit when you're excited about it. Like, you should be excited about it, because that's ultimately what we're all here for on both sides. Like, we're here to travel, whether we have pets or we're taking care of pets. So ultimately, if you're not excited about it, just don't do it. And yeah, communicate, flexibility. Those are the main things, I think. Yeah. But of course, my email is open, Instagram, whatever. I'll send over all of those links. And someone asked about discount code. Yes, I will send out discount codes to attendees for all of the things.
Yeah, we'll send an email to everyone on probably Friday or Saturday, depending on my schedule. But that will have everything from this presentation, including the discount code, all the links, all that jazz. So you can get that in a couple days. That was super awesome, Sam. Thank you so much for sharing your expertise. I think a lot of us are sort of chomping at the bit to get back out there. So it will be, hopefully folks here can put these tips into action whenever it's sort of safe to get out there and travel. I think this wasn't really a thing when I started traveling, and I'm really sort of wishing it was, because it is such a cool, much like couch surfing, it's a really cool community and a really cool way to sort of make travel not just more affordable, but much more interesting and immersive. So I do encourage everyone to give it a try if they think it's for them. Before we wrap up, though, I'm just going to share my screen again and go over a couple little housekeeping notes. for everyone. So we're super stoked that you came out tonight. For those of you who don't know, we host events every single week and have been all pandemic. We've got events sort of about specific topics, like tonight's talk or today's talk, depending on where you are, on house sitting. We've got other sort of topic focused talks coming up on family travel, long-term travel, so many more. We've also got regional specific happy hours where you can just much more informal. You can hang out, chat with people sort of in your area, talk about travel. You can find all of those at thenomadicnetwork.com/events. We've got them all for the next couple months planned out. So go there if you want to connect virtually with folks. And of course, we also have a book club every month. We read a really cool travel book. So our next one is next week. So if that's something you're interested in, if you're still locked down, can't go anywhere, and you want to travel vicariously, do come out to our book club events, because the author joins us for those. It's super cool, super fun, and a nice way to sort of travel without leaving your home. And if you'd like a replay of this event or any of our events, you can get those on Nomadic Mat Plus. All of the event replays are saved there, so you can access them anytime. You don't have to join live. Plus, you get tons of other bonus content. So if that's something you're interested in, you can check that out at members.nomadicmat.com. So that's all for me. Again, Sam, thank you so much. Thank you, everyone, for joining us. And enjoy the rest of your evening if you're here in Europe, afternoon if you're over in the US or Canada. And take care, everybody. And we'll see you guys later.
Thanks, everyone. Thanks, Chris.